Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we have some fairly big news. Another beta is coming and it is the return of the Proving Ground. So there's a lot to talk about here. There's a few different intros coming in because we've got a message from the community team and then also from the developers at CA Sophia. So let's jump right in with the first part here. So, hey folks, the time has come for us to talk about campaign AI, what we're working on in the wake of the first beta, and how we've used your feedback to help steer this big oft-wielding ship in the right direction. I'm assuming they mean second beta there, but yeah, cool. We're pleased to reveal that tomorrow, Thursday the 10th of April, we'll be launching our next campaign AI beta on Steam, once again giving you the chance to test out our next stage of tweaks and adjustments and provide us with your immensely valuable feedback. If you took part in our last beta, we'd love to get your thoughts on this latest round of changes, and if you've missed out last time, this is the perfect chance to see what we've been working on and have your voice heard. You'll find instructions on how to access the beta on the bottom of this blog when it goes live tomorrow, so check back when you see us confirm it's live. As ever, you'll be able to discuss these changes and provide feedback in our dedicated campaign AI beta forum in the CA community, as well as via a survey that will be running alongside the beta. These links will appear here tomorrow, and you'll also find the survey in-game on the news feed when you're playing the beta itself. So far, it's all standard, right? Now, there does seem to be some missing words here, because like this part doesn't really make sense as it starts as a sentence, and this happens every now and then. The problem is they sent us this file hot, so it won't be updated by the time that the video is ready to go. So yeah, here it says, henceforth be inducted into our rekindled Proving Grounds initiative. Some of you may recall this initiative from the Warhammer 2 days, but for those who don't, let me give you a brief introduction to what the Proving Grounds are. The Proving Grounds first debuted back in 2020 and gave our devs the opportunity to explore radical solutions and test systematic changes to core gameplay features while giving you the opportunity to try out these changes and provide feedback on them. Of course, there's no guarantee that these tested changes make it into the game, but it allows our devs to think outside the box a little and allows you to have your voices heard on what can be some pretty sweeping changes to core parts of the game. Basically, it's a chance for all of us to work together on improving Warhammer 3 for the greater good. The greater good. What? Okay. That's a weird thing to that was just a weird thing. I mean, I get the reference, but it just sounds so odd. With this current phase of the Proving Grounds, we're quietly confident that these campaign AI changes are moving in the right direction. These new changes we're now testing will help to show us what further refinements we need to make before considering bringing them into the main game, and how that might impact the difficulty of our player experience. Looking beyond this Proving Ground, we have a team internally starting to explore changes that we think we can make to sieges. Oh my god, finally! And we're hoping to bring you more on that in the summer. Oh my god, finally! This is a bad time, but let's continue. With that admin out of the way, it's once again time to hand over to the almighty Radoslav to be sure to check back tomorrow for the details on how to access it. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, the Proving Grounds was a very good thing back in 2020, and it did continue for a little bit of a time. It did help out with, like, say, for example, fixing up some stuff with the Twisted in the Twilight, where the DLC had massive issues, so, you know, there was a beta after that to just kind of see how things could get fixed up. I'm glad that this initiative is getting back up and running. We do have a message from Radoslav here, so let's talk about that. Hello once again, I'm Radoslav Borisov. I'm going to butcher that name a lot. Principal Technical Designer at CA Sophia. Me and the team are back to address further issues with the campaign AI. Before I dive into the specifics, I want to put a big caveat up front. We've read your feedback and we are all aware that there are other parts of core game experience that you all want us to work on. Several topics that have come up regularly include sieges, auto-resolve, diplomacy, endgame, and overall difficulty. While those topics are outside the scope at the current beta, we are planning to make work on those later this year. The scale of work on the above-mentioned topics likely will not allow us to address everything, but we want to start from somewhere. The next game areas we will be working on are going to be sieges and auto-resolve. Expect more information from us later in the year. Moving back to campaign AI in Beta 2, we're going to focus on the following topics: anti-player bias. There are a number of issues arising from the ways in which human and AI factions are unequally evaluated. Distance scaling. We received a lot of feedback that allows us to identify and isolate several issues with the way tasks are evaluated and prioritized for all AI factions. Aggression, a new iteration of the changes originally introduced in Beta 1. We're focusing on keeping the AI more aggressive and dynamic while mitigating instances of fixating on the player or suicidally. And then finally, faction potential, a new iteration on the changes from Beta 1, with a focus on mitigating edge cases around important minor factions and introducing a bit more variance between campaigns. That's pretty good. Yeah, overall this sounds pretty good. I'm assuming that the Beta 2 is going to be the last beta that we get on campaign AI. There could be a third, but it does seem that they're already looking towards the sieges. Overall, the first beta was very good. I did like the stuff that was there, so hopefully this one will just fix the last remaining issues. So Section 1, Anti-Player Bias, Threat versus Strength. There exist two different measures scales within the AI, Threat and Strength. Threat overview. Every faction in the game has a threat evaluation based on a variety of factors such as diplomatic activity, interactions with campaign objects via agents' actions, occupation decisions, region count, among others. The main purpose of the threat score is to inform the AI how powerful and influential other factions, even without them being allied and hostile actually. The above mentioned threat evaluations result in two distinct scores: Global Strategic Threat Score and Individual Threat Score. Global Strategic Threat is like a leaderboard on who's the most powerful and influential. Individualized threat scores are individual for every faction and reflect their view. Global Strategic Threat Score is used as a baseline for these calculations, but factions take additional parameters in consideration, such as proximity, diplomatic attitude, direct aggressive actions, among others. The impact on threat scores are wide-reaching and affect deal evaluation, diplomatic attitude, task generation. There are additional distinctions between a main faction threat and common threats for several factions, but those are a subject for another time. Okay, so there might be like a third one. Overall, this sounds pretty interesting. It's good to learn more about what actually happens in the background of the game, because there's so much going on that just doesn't really get shown a lot. So this is cool. This is actually definitely very cool. Right, strength overview. Whenever the AI needs to understand how strong any force is in battle, it does a strength evaluation. Said strength evaluation takes into consideration everything the AI knows about it: units, experience, bonuses, stances, among others. Every time a task is being evaluated, a strength evaluation is performed on the target. Depending on the result of the evaluation, all owned factions are evaluated to find a force we can justify resourcing. Finding a force with a good strength ratio against the target is critical, and failing to do so requires additional resources to expend to recruit. Okay, so this is what makes the armies tick a little bit, which is actually pretty damn cool. So what we changed. In this beta, we're changing the threat player actions generates between 90 and 120%. Additionally, a new multiplier that changes the player's strength from 100% always to between 100 and 120% based on the AI personality and campaign difficulty level. Also, the vast majority of the tasks of the attack human forces/settlements variety has been removed. The ones that were not removed have their priority greatly reduced. Okay, so it's going to focus less on us, which, you know, factions, the way I understand it, factions that are closer to us are still going to be active against us if we're fighting them, but the ones that are on the other side of the world, for example, you know, if you're playing Grand Cafe and then you see random Tyrion appearing, that's going to be a bit less, which, you know, should be cool. Now, why we changed it. The current biggest source of anti-player bias in the game is the threat system. There exists a multiplier that changes the threat player actions generate from 50% to 200% based on AI personality and campaign difficulty level. This causes the player threat to scale very differently compared to the AI. The goal of these changes is to have the AI evaluate the player much more closer to how it evaluates other AIs. The addition of a strength multiplier aims to align the way different systems perceive the player, leading to more consistent behavior overall. Since the threat system affects a variety of other systems, such as task generation, diplomatic attitude calculations, and deal evaluation, improvement in the AI's behavior in those areas are expected as well. A prime example of an issue that these changes aim to resolve: if an AI faction borders the player, it will go into defensive posture, mostly due to the task of the defend regions of neighboring threat variety, but the factions that are close and not actually bordering the player will aggressively attack due to the attack threat variety. Okay, what I'm a little bit concerned here is that too many factions bordering you are going to be like defensive, right? I rather see a bit of a healthy mix of in between. Not sure if that's going to be taken into account. But overall, if it's ignoring the player a little bit more, it's going to be a bit better. I know there's some people that do struggle, especially when the AI starts piling on, because it can just easily snowball. Now, let's go into the last section here. How will these changes affect you in-game? Changing the level of threat that the player actions generate means that the campaign AI will evaluate the player actions with less bias, while retaining the ability to respond appropriately when attacked, meaning the multiplier should help make the campaign AI's aggressiveness scale more closely with the difficulty settings you choose. Finally, removing and deprioritizing the campaign AI's preference for attacking human players over other factions will take the target off your back, unless warranted by your playstyle. Yeah, I mean, that sounds perfect. That actually sounds perfect. That's what I want from this. We want an aggressive campaign, but only if we choose to have an aggressive campaign. Obviously, if you're playing like very hard or legendary, it should be more targeted towards you, and there should be more wars against you. But if you're playing like a normal, easy, or even maybe a hard campaign, it should be a lot less stressy. It should be there for the players to be able to have a little bit more fun and less sweaty campaign play. Alright, number 2, distance scaling. Inside the AI, when the tasks are being evaluated before actually being assigned to a specific resource for execution, their priority gets modified based on how far away the target is from the asset the AI wants to use. The AI's perception of how far away is measured in turns. For existing assets, the calculation takes into account movement extends and where the appropriate usage of stances like tunneling and forced march. When the asset is being used is a fresh army that needs to be hired, the calculation additionally takes into account the distance to recruitment region and time to recruit. That just sounds odd, doesn't it? The wording just sounds a bit odd. But let's continue. Scaling overview. Currently, the time and distance scaling is constrained, so tasks have a minimum priority. If they take more than 4 or 5 turns for recruiting and non-recruiting respectively, the intention behind that current setup is to restrict the AI's horizon so it doesn't venture out from its holdings without a very good reason. I mean, that's not really the case. I have seen many factions move quite far. It depends on what they're testing it on, I guess, but I normally play very hard, and yeah, they move quite a lot. But let's continue. For a majority of cases, this works fine, but we noticed several cases where a short horizon does not allow for the AI to do certain map traversals without accessing to tunneling stance or movement bonuses. One example is the Southland's World's Edge Mountain province. The AI struggles to invade it normally. Right, so this is extra terrain where it causes slight issues. Okay, yep, that makes sense. What we changed. To combat this in the beta, we're going to introduce a scaling component based on campaign progression that changes both time and distance scaling dynamically. Current values are minimum of 20% priority at above 4 turns away when recruiting, minimum of 10% priority at above 5 turns away when not recruiting. The new values when AI has more than 15 regions, minimum of 15% priority at above 6 turns when recruiting, and minimum of 15% priority at above 7 turns when not recruiting. Okay, so this actually might be the whole case of stopping the factions that are just turtling lately, actually. New values when AI has more than 30 regions, minimum of 20% priority at above 7 turns away when recruiting, and minimum value of 20% priority at above 8 turns when not recruiting. Why we changed it. The current setup works well at restraining the AI from breaking up its territory and avoiding cases of province hopping and border gore. This holds true for the early game very consistently, but as turns pass and empires become bigger, it also results in undesirable behavior. Two types of issues we're aiming to resolve with these changes are certain regions' provinces being inaccessible to some factions when AI, I guess this is like the whole thing with nobody attacking the Dread Fleet, for example, and larger AI empires stagnating and armies recruited in central regions getting stuck there due to borderlands being far away enough so tasks targeting enemies in and around them hit minimum priority. This is something that happened to me very recently, actually, where I saw Sinesh just basically holding up in Brionne for some reason and not moving. There was like 9 to 12 armies there. How will these changes affect you in-game? You should see AI empires expanding more consistently and see less stuck armies idling in their core provinces that are too far away from danger to provoke action. This should make the mid and late game more dynamic, as well as making powerful AI empires spread their assets out more appropriately, simultaneously making the campaign AI more ambitious while opening up strategic opportunities to attack them as their borders expand and soft spots organically appear in their defenses. This is really good. So if I'm reading this correctly, it should be very similar to what happens in Paradox games, for example. If you look at like Crusader Kings, Hoi 4 and stuff, you should start to see real big and active empires. If that's going to be the case, it's going to be quite interesting to see how this goes, especially with faction potential, which is getting a little bit of a change, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if faction potential stays more or less the same, that means that like if you're playing in a faction in Cafe, there's a Lizardmen faction, or maybe the Dark Elves will get really high potential to start expanding quite dramatically. I do wonder how this is going to work out. I can't wait to actually test this out. Alright, section 3, aggression. We've further tweaked how the AI assesses the strength of rival factions, with a strong focus on very hard and legendary difficulty. Okay, this affects me then. What we changed: average enemy strength and threat modifiers for strategic calculations reduced from 20% to 10%. Very hard and legendary modifiers for defensive cowardly factions are now allowed to exceed 100%. Why we changed it? These changes do not aim to introduce new behaviors, but rather increase the precision of calculations. Introducing margins of error or modifiers to the raw calculations the AI performs has been used as a method of introducing difficulty and behavior variety, but both feedback and data show that the wider margins disproportionately worsen the gameplay experience. The above-mentioned margin of error is the leading cause of AI factions misjudging their chances and suiciding armies, or not leaving enough defenders in threatened territories. How will these changes affect you in-game? These changes should now prevent the AI from being overly aggressive when it makes no sense to be, resulting in strategically poor decision-making that can result in players fighting one-sided battle that don't make sense in the context of their campaigns and aren't fun to play. Okay, so this happens fairly often, where you'll see, for example, Skaven armies mostly just making slave stacks and attacking some of your most powerful stacks directly head-on with just one Skaven army. There's a lot of cases where enemies will just send peasant stacks and just really crap stacks out, which makes sense for defending purposes because, you know, you've got a garrison, it adds extra forces, but when you're seeing just these crap stacks come out, it really does make it kind of boring. And seeing as auto-resolve is right now not great, you're mostly fighting battles that you know you can win without too much of a problem. I do wonder how this is going to affect the game, however, because keep in mind that this was tweaked back in Warhammer 2 when a bunch of people were complaining that the Skaven were being way too aggressive. So maybe some values are going to have to be individualized? We're going to have to wait and see, I guess. But either way, remember, this is going to be a beta, so this is all in the testing phase. If you're playing the beta and, you know, you're suffering a little bit, just feedback is always great. Section 4, faction potential. This one's a big one. After reviewing data and reading feedback from Beta 1, the team and I reached the conclusion that we need a new category of faction potential for certain minor factions. One of the primary goals of this faction potential system is to regulate the strength of individual factions when played by the AI in a dynamic way. This rather direct way of manipulation is very effective, but it also has its downsides. The main downside is that the more variance we introduce, be it by shifting more of the faction's potential regulation to a random roll or by introducing more categories, the less we can rely on averages. Oh, okay. So it might be a little bit volatile, which I guess makes sense, but it's good for a beta. I believe that the best approach is to continue tweaking faction potentials with subsequent updates, but the goal for the current beta is to establish a baseline we can build on top of. With all that said, we're aiming for the following. All major factions should win their respective theaters at least some of the time. Minor factions that are not starting enemies for major factions should have the opportunity to survive at least until the mid-game. Cool. The player should be able to influence the development of factions they've met. Developments under the Shroud should have sufficient variance to the point where it's hard to accurately predict the state of the theater before scouting it. Okay, so maybe less Dark Elf tides, because it happens a lot lately. What we've changed. Lower the faction potential of a few outlier factions that have been overperforming. Oracles of Tzeentch, Blooded Wanderers, Cult of Pleasure, and Khemri. I don't know, man. I guess Cult of Pleasure does perform very well, but I'd say that Malekith performs better. Oracles of Tzeentch is very half-half as of late with the recent patch with 6.1, so I guess we're going to have to wait and see there. Increase the faction potential of several underperforming factions. Clan Moldor, yep, that one just kind of stagnates. Warhost of the Apocalypse, yeah, there's just no movement with Archaon. The Hagreif faction, Itza, the Bloody Hands, Caravan of the Blue Roses, Puppets of Misrule, and Bone Rattlers. Okay, this is pretty cool. New category of faction potential will be applied to the following minor factions. All Electocount factions, Calador, Elarion, Safri, Overlords of Zardok, Varg, Goromadi Tribe, Kul, Scaling, Sufbar, Karak-Hern, Greybeards Prospectors, Imperial Wardens, the Jade Custodians, Crooked Moon Mutinous Gits. I thought they were always supposed to be stationary. They're supposed to defend so everyone else goes for it. Weird. Thief Snatchers, Ropsman Clan, Slanhupek, Defenders of the Great Plan. What? Aren't the Defenders... Wait, the Defenders are the minor faction for Nakai, right? Clan Worms, Clan Spittle, Clan Morbius, Rakarth Dynasty, Templehof, and Musalon. It'll be good to see Musalon actually expanding a bit more, so that's not too bad. I mean, overall, it's going to be quite interesting to see how these factions go. It's very interesting to see some factions were basically supposed to be there just to be a small nuisance are now going to be elevated a little bit. I wonder how this is going to go. And then finally, why we changed it. Actually, there's two sections there. I haven't seen that was the bottom one. But why we changed it. We have heard you loud and clear that having a variety of minor factions survive and potentially thrive is something you want to see. Yeah, that's correct. We have chosen these specific minor factions for their gameplay importance in the relative theaters. And we've avoided factions that are starting enemies of playable factions where possible. Additionally, major factions that were over or underperforming have been adjusted accordingly. What's going to be interesting here is the the Cooked Moon Mutinous Gits, basically. Because they start off with a very good, proper settlement. Karakake Peaks is quite nicely defended, so it's going to be curious to see how far they expand. This is going to be really interesting. And finally, how will these changes affect you in game? In a campaign, these changes to faction potential should... My god, that was a loud bike. Let's continue. Should make sure that major factions assert their expected level of control over their theaters, e.g. Reichland over the Empire, but without wiping out every minor faction within reach. This should establish a more reliable baseline that should keep more major and minor factions in play for longer, allowing players to influence the development of the factions they meet and making bigger strategic impact. The new degree of unpredictability under the Shroud should also create more variety between different campaign playthroughs, while also preserving the strength and influence of major factions. What I want to know here is if this is going to affect confederations, because we're barely seeing confederations as it stands. And I think that this might just make the minor factions a little bit too strong, where confederations will become less and less known. Not only for the AI, but also the players too. Confederations right now are just super iffy. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's bad, but in some cases you should have the right to confederate a minor faction. Again, maybe one day we'll start to see more mechanics being introduced. There wasn't any for Omens of Destruction, sadly, but there was one for the dwarves there. And it was very good during Thrones of Decay. Hopefully we'll see more of that. We do have some miscellaneous fixes, which I find very, very curious. So, some additional bugs around how certain AI factions navigate and make use of campaign features, right? Sister of the Twilight will now try and actively pursue specific item sets in Forge of Day. That makes sense. You want them to be as strong as possible because sometimes they're just too weak. Disciples of Ashut, the Legion of Asgore, and the Warhost of Zar will better navigate the Hellforge and focus on obtaining higher tier manufacturing options. This is about time. Way too many times do you see the Chaos Dwarf AI factions with just Hobgoblin stacks and very, very few Chaos Dwarf units or even big artillery pieces. So that's lovely. This is the really interesting one. Vampire Count factions will prioritize going for the bloodline they are thematically aligned with. Very, very curious. Maybe they are actually looking at the potential of doing a Vampire Count DLC in the future down the line, because this is very specific. It's a very specific change. Improve the AI handling of the bloodletting mechanic. Great. In most cases, you have seen with the Khorne faction, especially now that there's a bunch more in-game, they'll just stay still and start taking the negatives, so you'll hopefully see a bit more active Khorne factions. Just Skulltaker seems to be doing very well lately. It's very odd. And then Reared here, just 2 for the Realm of Chaos specifically. All Cafe factions will now probably try and capture back Bastions, which, I mean, should be in the Immortal Empires too. Very weird because, yeah, you know, they stopped working on the Realm of Chaos, right? I mean, there was a whole blog about it. We did a celebration. I used the air horn. It's very odd. And then again, the Kurgan Warband will now properly choose target settlements, targets after destroying Bastion settlements. Again, that should be in Immortal Empires. There are some weird instances where just... yeah, Cafe just ignores the Bastion, and then Village just pushes his way in. Most of the minor factions up there just don't really know how to navigate through it. If that can be put into Immortal Empires properly, it would be great. But yeah, I mean, overall, these sound like very, very good changes. I'm looking forward to trying them out tomorrow. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. We'll start a bit of a discussion. Yeah, overall, very, very, very interesting. Here's hoping for the best. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.